So today was the Obamacare ruling at the Supreme Court. There are 5 more Supreme Court rulings to go. And you don't know what cases they're going to rule on until the day they rule. And so every day in line, first in line to find out if today would be his day, has been this man, Jim Obergefell. He's got the red arrow to him there. First in line early this morning, this is him. Just as he has been on every other Supreme Court decision day this month, he's been there number 1, waiting in line, along with everybody else. It was Mr. Obergefell's lawsuit against the state of Ohio that turned into the marriage case that could, tomorrow or any day now, result in gay marriage being legalized nationwide. Or it could result in potentially the opposite of that, or it could result in something in between. In his case, Jim Obergefell has been seeking to have his marriage recognized specifically on his late husband's death certificate. And so he stood there this morning in line at the Supreme Court with a photo of his late husband and his Supreme Court admissions card with the number 1 on it, because Jim Obergefell is first in line every day, waiting to get into the court to hear. When the court first heard the oral arguments in his case in April, Mr. Obergefell's side was argued in part by a lawyer who is a legend in the activist world and the legal community, Maddow, but she had never before argued a case before the Supreme Court. And because it's the Supreme Court, we don't have video of the arguments, but we do have the audio for what happened in the court that day on the marriage case as they were arguing this case in April. And this is what happened as Mary Maddow finished up her arguments. Check this out.
And I will say, just before I sit down, if I may reserve my time, Your Honor, that in terms of the question of who decides, it's not about the court versus the states. It's about the individual making the choice to marry and whom to marry or the government.
Thank you, counsel. General, would you like to take a moment?
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice. Actually, Mr. Chief Justice, if the court is ready.
We're ready.
Okay. It was rather refreshing, actually.
So Justice Scalia said hearing from the burn in hell guy was a rather refreshing moment at the Supreme Court that day in April as they heard the arguments on the marriage case. Supreme Court police ended up arresting the demonstrator, the guy who was yelling about hell and homosexuality being an abomination and what God thinks. The Supreme Court police charged him with making a harangue or oration within the Supreme Court, which is an illegal thing. This guy has done this sort of thing before. He did it at the Senate from the gallery. He did it at President Obama's inauguration from a tree, as you see here. But in April, at arguments in the marriage case, he got inside the Supreme Court and he screamed and screamed in the court, but they dragged him out. And then the Solicitor General, Don Verrilli, was able to begin his part of the case. And that was one of the more remarkable things that happened during those oral arguments. One of the other remarkable things was the moment when the conservative Justice Samuel Alito mused out loud about a hypothetical adult brother and sister who have lived together for 25 years and who love each other just like married couples do. Just exactly like that. It was a weird moment.
Well, let's think about 2 groups of 2 people. The first is a same-sex couple who have been together for 25 years and they get married, either as a result of the change in state law or as a result of a court decision. The second, 2 people are unmarried siblings. They've lived together for 25 years. Their financial relationship is the same as the same-sex couple. They share household expenses and household chores in the same way. They care for each other in the same way. Is there any reason why the law should treat the 2 groups differently?
You sure they care for each other in the exact same way? If he means that, Justice Sam Alito, in the marriage case, comparing gay couples apparently to brother-sister adult incest. And that was before he suggested it would be as absurd to let gay couples be married as it would be to let a group of 4 well-educated lawyers get married as a foursome. things got a little weird on this subject with Justice Alito.
Suppose we rule in your favor in this case, and then after that, a group consisting of 2 men and 2 women apply for a marriage license. Would there be any ground for denying them a license? These are 4 people, 2 men and 2 women. It's not the sort of polygamous relationship, polygamous marriages that existed in other societies and still exist in some societies today. And let's say they're all consenting adults, highly educated. They're all lawyers. What would be the ground under the logic of the decision you would like us to hand down in this case? What would be the logic of denying them the same right?
Gay couples, random groups of 4 people with the same profession, adult brother-sister couples who sleep together, it's all the same. There was a sort of creep factor to the questioning in this case from Justice Alito, certainly, but from some of the other justices as well. And if you're now sort of trying to read the tea leaves from these little excerpts so you can guess how the court's going to rule tomorrow or Monday, you do, I have to say, have a lot of leaves to pick from. Listen to this exchange. This was the lawyer from Michigan defending the Michigan state ban on same-sex marriage. You'll also hear 2 justices here jump in. Sonia Sotomayor, happy birthday, and Justice Anthony Kennedy. Michigan's argument for why they want to ban gay people from getting married is that Michigan says, if gay people can get married in Michigan, that will mean more children will be born out of wedlock in Michigan. Which is a hard thing to get your head around, right? At least that's how it went for poor Michigan lawyer John Birch, who just got live dissected here by the justices.
The out-of-wedlock birth rate in this country has gone from 10% to 40% from 1970 to today. And I think everybody would agree that that's not a good result for children. And to the extent that you're changing the meaning of marriage.
That wasn't changed because of the recent gay marriages.
No, I'm not saying that at all.
In Massachusetts, we've got data that the rates have remained constant since they changed their laws.
Right, but as several justices have noted, that's a very short time frame. The whole idea of same-sex marriage.
But you're the one that brought the statistic up, and under
right. But listen,
and under your view, it would be very difficult for same-sex couples to adopt some of these children. I think the argument cuts quite against you.
But when I'm talking,
and it goes back to the basic point where you began, where you had some premise that only opposite-sex couples can have a bonding with the child. That was very interesting, but it's just a wrong premise.
Justice Anthony Kennedy, who everybody expects to author the decision in this case if it is a pro-gay marriage decision. Anthony Kennedy there just picking apart the argument of the anti-gay marriage lawyer from Michigan at the Supreme Court when the case was argued. I just have one more for you. This is the moment when Justice Alito led a back and forth with the gay rights lawyer Mary Maddow on whether or not the philosopher Plato was kind of into gay sex.
But did they have same-sex marriage in ancient Greece?
Yeah, I don't believe they had anything comparable to what we have, Your Honor. And we're talking about.
Well, they had marriage, didn't they?
Yeah, they had, yes.
And
they had some sort of marriage.
And they had same-sex relations, did they not?
Yes, and they also were able to.
People like Plato wrote in favor of that, did he not?
In favor of.
Same-sex, wrote approvingly of same-sex relationships, did he not?
I believe so, Your Honor.
Yes, Justice Alito. I think Plato was into that. Can we talk about something else? At times, the argument was a little weird, right? This marriage case, when it was argued, the reason you haven't heard this tape before is because at the time this case was argued in April, it was overshadowed in the news by the giant riots in Baltimore, which happened right at the same time, right in this exact same news cycle. But this is a huge case, and the oral arguments in this case were really strange and fascinating. At one point, after Justice Kennedy and Justice Scalia kept talking about the unchanging nature of marriage for millennia, there was this moment when Justice Ginsburg jumped in to point out that actually wives aren't their husband's property anymore, and marriage has changed a lot, thank you very much. Just these great, fascinating, and at times strange arguments. All that and Plato's sex life and Justice Alito's weird incest thing and lawyers marrying in groups and the guy screaming about hellfire and damnation being dragged out of the courtroom. It was a very, very exciting argument. And now here we are 2 months later, and we are about to get this ruling. And Jim Obergefell has been there first in line, waiting in line, and he has sat in the court to hear every decision the justices have handed down this month, but they have not yet handed down their decision on his case. And now there are only 2 decision days left, tomorrow and Monday. We had kind of assumed that the justices would wait for their very last day to release this ruling, one of their most consequential rulings in modern history, let alone this term. But there have been reports and rumors and anecdotal suggestions that perhaps it's not going to be Monday, perhaps it's going to be tomorrow. Hold that thought.